The story of Esther is a narrative of courage, divine providence, and the survival of a people. It begins in the capital of the Persian Empire, Susa, during the reign of King Ahasuerus, ruler of 127 provinces. The king hosts a lavish banquet and commands his wife, Queen Vashti, to appear. When she refuses, her crown is taken and she is banished from the kingdom. A search begins across the vast empire for a new queen. Among those brought to Susa is Hadassah, a Jewish orphan raised by her cousin Mordecai. Mordecai advises her to conceal her Jewish heritage. She takes the Persian name Esther, a name that would soon echo through history. Esther finds favor with the king's eunuch, and eventually with the king himself, who is captivated by her grace and modesty. In the year 478 BC, Esther is crowned Queen of Persia, unaware that her position would be the key to her people's salvation. Shortly after, Mordecai discovers a plot to assassinate the king. He alerts Esther, and the king's life is saved, though Mordecai remains unrewarded. Power shifts with the rise of Haman, the king's chief minister. A man of immense pride, he demands all bow before him. Mordecai, a man of faith, refuses to bow. To him, such honor belongs to God alone. This act of conviction ignites Haman's fury. Consumed by rage, Haman manipulates the king into issuing a decree, the total extermination of all Jews within the empire. The date is chosen by casting lots, or Purim, landing on the 13th day of the month of Adar. When the decree is published, Mordecai and his people are plunged into mourning. The news reaches the palace, and Esther is gripped with fear. In the Catholic additions to the text, we find the heartfelt prayer of Mordecai, begging God to remember his covenant with Israel. Mordecai challenges Esther to use her position, famously asking if she was made queen for such a time as this. Esther is seized with deathly anxiety. In the Greek editions, she strips off her royal finery and covers her head with ashes in repentance. She prays, "Help me, who am alone and have no help but you." Her faith begins to overtake her fear. Esther calls for a 3-day fast. She resolves to approach the king unsummoned, a crime punishable by death. With the words, "If I perish, I perish," Esther prepares for the greatest leap of faith of her life. In the Catholic version, Esther enters the throne room pale with fear. The king is at first furious at her intrusion, but God changes the spirit of the king into mildness. He rushes from his throne to support her, extending his golden scepter to spare her life. Instead of revealing her plea, Esther strategically invites the king and Haman to a banquet, beginning a delicate diplomatic dance. At the first banquet, the king asks for her request. She demurs, inviting them to a second banquet the following day. Haman leaves with pride, but his joy is soured by the sight of Mordecai, who still refuses to bow. He orders a gallows built for his enemy. That night, the king cannot sleep. He orders the royal chronicles to be read and discovers that Mordecai was never honored for saving his life. The next morning, the king asks Haman how to honor a man he delights in. Haman, thinking it is for himself, suggests a royal parade. To Haman's horror, he is forced to personally lead Mordecai through the city in honor. The tables of Providence are starting to turn. At the second banquet, the king again asks Esther for her request. This time, she reveals her identity and Haman's plot. "A foe and enemy," she cries. "This wicked Haman." The king is enraged by the treachery against his queen. The king orders Haman to be hanged on the very 50-cubit gallows he had built for Mordecai. Justice is served by the hand of Providence. Though the first decree cannot be revoked, the king allows Mordecai to issue a new edict. The Jews may arm and defend themselves. On the 13th of Adar, the Jews successfully defeat their attackers. What was meant to be a day of sorrow becomes a day of triumph. This victory is the origin of the Feast of Purim, a time of joy, feasting, and charity that is still celebrated today. Mordecai is promoted to the highest rank, serving the king and seeking the welfare of all his people. In the story of Esther, God's name is never mentioned in the Hebrew, yet his presence is everywhere in the coincidences of history. In Catholic theology, Esther prefigures the Blessed Virgin Mary, the ultimate intercessor who pleads for her people before the King of Kings. Her story teaches us the power of prayer, the importance of spiritual discipline, and the courage to act when God calls. For perhaps it is for a time like this that you too have been called. Thank you for watching.